Hello, our nightmarish creatures. Before we get into tonight's creepy tale, we would like to thank our partners over at Dubby. Dubby is the delicious energy drink company packed with different flavors, compounds for boosts to your focus and energy, and doesn't have that uncomfortable jittery effect. Try Dubby now at dubby.gg and get 10% off at checkout using our personal code, Dark Little Voices. And now, on to tonight's creepy tale. I never should have read those notes by you Swedish creep. Around the time when all this took place, I had just moved to a new town after my most recent relationship had ended. The apartment I rented was in a small rundown neighborhood. Not the worst, but far from the best. It was enough for a bachelor such as myself. I had a small backyard where I, if the weather was decent enough, at times would grab a beer and relax after work. It was a Sunday, of that I'm certain. I was bored and had decided to take a stroll to kill some time. It was early autumn. The air was crisp and cool. The only greenery in the area I found myself in consisted of groves made up of leafy trees that walled off the path I was walking on from the busy two-lane expressway. 4 months had passed since I had moved here, and apart from working at a warehouse, I would sometimes go out for drinks with a couple of colleagues, if my wallet would allow it, that is. So, as you can tell, my life was quite run-of-the-mill and uneventful, but that would gradually change from that Sunday and onwards. I had covered most of my immediate area by foot. The only part I hadn't really explored was the aforementioned nature area, located south of my neighborhood. It was Amir, a guy from work, that had told me that there had been a fire there years ago in a now deserted industrial park. It is believed to have started in an auto body paint shop. The fire spread rapidly after that. 10 or so people died that day, while those who survived sustained injuries from smoke inhalation or severe burns. Despite their best efforts, the paint shop, as well as several other buildings, burnt down to the ground before the fire department managed to put out the fire. The businesses that made it, later on, moved to a new industrial area, the same one where my job is located. It was never determined exactly what caused the fire, but some said that a disgruntled employee was the culprit. The auto body paint shop, in Amir's own words, was a place where people were treated like animals. The working conditions left a lot to be desired, but every attempt forwarding complaints to HR was shut down. According to Amir, the employers were snakes who lacked even an inkling of humanity. After a while, I came across a back road that broke away from the main path. It didn't look like much. The asphalt was cracked and overgrown with weeds. There was also an underpass littered with junk, both in and outside of it. Beer cans, porn magazines, black garbage bags containing God knows what. Yeah, you get the idea. The inner walls of the underpass were covered with graffiti, mostly in the shape of illegal tags. For a second I thought I was entering some sort of gang territory, but even I knew that made little to no sense. As soon as I came out on the other side, I could see the shambled remains of an old industrial park in the distance. Earlier that day, during lunch, I had found a thread on a forum discussing the fire. While scrolling through the comments, I came across older photos taken before it all burnt down. All that remained now were blackened skeletal structures that reminded me of a war zone in a faraway country. My mind might have been playing tricks with me, but at times I could almost sense the subtle reek of chemicals and fire smoke still hanging in the air. A tragic reminder of what had happened. Just beyond the fire's epicenter, I could make out what was left of some of the buildings. Brick walls, roofs made out of corrugated sheet metal, blown out windows, shattered glass. Everything was shrouded in soot. I looked up. Encircling the industrial ghost town was a forest, mostly birch, pine, and rampant undergrowth. I had yet to encounter another person, but I didn't complain. A small voice in the back of my head told me that it was probably for the best. Who knew what kind of people would choose to roam around in a place such as this, especially once it got dark? I had seen enough. It was time for me to head back. However, as I was about to start backtracking, I caught a glimpse of something by the tree line. It looked like a small trail leading further into the woods. There was something scenic to it, a stark contrast to what I had just experienced. But as I looked at my wristwatch, I realized it was much later than I had thought. Tomorrow, then. There's always tomorrow. And with that, I turned around and started walking. Halfway through the underpass, I saw something in the corner of my eye. Something small and white amidst the jumble of trash. I stopped dead in my tracks and crouched down to take a closer look. Underneath a flipped-over shopping cart was a folded piece of paper. It glowed in the dirt, like a pearl in a polluted ocean. Gently, I picked it up, and that is when I noticed that it was surprisingly clean, as if it had been put there. Intrigued, I unfolded the note. In large, childlike letters, someone had written a message using a marker. It read, "I see you." Intuitively, I looked around. No one was there but me. I'm not embarrassed to admit that I got paranoid. For a second, I had deluded myself into thinking that I was being watched. But like I said, I was alone. After all, I hadn't come across anyone while I had been in the area. The only person present was me. I glossed over the message again, but this time I caught myself smiling. This must be some sort of game I was unaware of. A way for kids to entertain themselves. They were probably nearby, or maybe they had gone home to eat dinner. Either way, I ended up putting the note back where I found it, so as to not disturb the little game, and then went straight home. Back at the apartment, I microwaved some leftovers, watched TV, and passed out on my couch at roughly 11 p.m. My sleep was dreamless, and I, more or less, forgot about the note I had found. But little did I know, that was just the beginning. Next day was the beginning of a new work week. As usual, during lunch, I was sitting with my phone, just scrolling through the internet. Just out of curiosity, I decided to see if I could find the trail I had encountered on Google Maps, and when you know it, I did. Not only that, judging from what I saw, the small forested trail seemed as if it would be a perfect detour to and from work. So, as we were getting off early that day, I decided to check it out on my bike. My initial reaction had been correct. It truly was scenic. Best of all, it saved me roughly 15 minutes compared to my usual route to work. The downside, I suppose, was that I had to pass through the underpass, and this time around, something even stranger, and dare I say, more frightening occurred. As soon as I reached the crummy-looking tunnel, my nostrils were assaulted by an odor that almost made me gag. It was so bad I had to stop and get off my bike. After getting done retching, I noticed something to my right. Someone had attached a note to one of the walls. Luckily, I didn't have to get closer to be able to see what it said. In childlike handwriting, someone had written, "I like you." I raised my eyebrows in surprise. What the hell was this? It was the very same handwriting as the first note. By this point, I also figured out that the stench was coming from the note itself. Someone, judging from the smell, had attached it using fecal matter. I could feel my gag reflexes acting up again, but as I was ready to get back on my bike, a loud, deafening sound made me jump. My ears started ringing. My temples felt as if they were about to explode. Startled, I looked around, and that is when I witnessed something behind me, at the edge of the underpass, laying on the path were the crumbled remains of a brick. Was this a part of these kids' little game? Now, I'm not one to lose my temper that easily, but at that moment, I became enraged. Without a second thought, I rushed towards the broken brick, and as soon as I exited the underpass, I looked around for any sign of life. I saw nothing and no one, so I decided to look around among the trees and bushes. After 5 minutes, I gave up. Whoever had thrown the projectile were long gone or perhaps were hiding somewhere else. I decided that it was better to just head home. Later that evening, I pondered whether or not I should use my old route. But you see, as a man, I'm plagued with something called pride. There was no way that I, a grown male, would allow myself to be scared off by a gang of misfits. So, despite my little mishap, I decided to use the detour the next day. This time, on my way to work, I noticed that the note, as well as the disgusting stench, was gone. Apart from that, the underpass looked undisturbed. I know how it might sound, as if I'm making excuses for this kind of behavior, but a part of me sympathized with whoever these kids were. After all, the town wasn't the most exciting. Also, Amir had told me that most of the nearby youth recreation centers had been closed down, as local gangs used them for selling drugs and even recruiting younger kids. Far-fetched perhaps, but maybe the underpass as well as the closed-down industrial park functioned as some sort of sanctuary for the kids that lived around the area. Come to think of it, I can't even recall some of the weird places me and my friends would hang out around when I was young, but not only that, we would raise hell whenever we could. The workday went by swimmingly, and at 6 p.m., it was time to head out. The forecast for the day was rain with less than zero chance of sunshine. However, the rain had mostly lit up when I reached my detour. Due to the heavy presence of clouds, the forest was darker than usual. So for that reason, I sped up as I wanted to get home as quickly as possible. However, as soon as I saw the underpass, I noticed something was extremely wrong. Someone had blocked the entrance with trash in all shapes and sizes. Initially, I thought that I could simply get off my bike and heave myself over, but that was before I noticed the rusted barbed wire and sharp, pointy objects. So I ended up parking my bike by the underpass before I started, as careful as I could as to not cut myself on anything, to remove the blockade. While I was getting my hands dirty, I started thinking, how come I have yet to encounter anyone on this specific route? Above all, who would go out of their way to torment a nobody like me, but in such an elaborate fashion? First the notes. Innocent, sure, but still weird. Then the brick throwing. I was honestly starting to feel somewhat uncomfortable. Roughly halfway through clearing up the trash, I spotted something that made my blood run cold. There, on the ground in front of me, stuck between two bricks, was a folded note. As if on instinct, I reached out and grabbed it. The moment the piece of paper was level with my face, I sensed that smell again, but fainter this time. I should have thrown away that damn note and just left, but I didn't. Instead, curiosity got the better of me. I unfolded the note, and what I saw filled me with disgust and despair. I want you inside me. I just kept staring at the words in front of me. Marker pen. Same juvenile letters. Maybe the younger, edgier me would have laughed it off, but that was then. Whatever discomfort I had felt earlier was nothing compared to what I had felt at that moment. I ended up ripping the revolting message into pieces and was about to get on my bike when I heard something. I couldn't quite make it out, but it had come from somewhere further up one of the tree-covered slopes that lined the path. Was I being watched? I guess the old saying rings true. A criminal always returns to the scene of the crime. I had to remind myself that I was more likely just dealing with a bunch of kids. A couple of really messed up kids, but still. So, with that in mind, I puffed up my chest and yelled in the most authoritarian voice I could muster.
Okay, you little shits! Come out so!
My newly found bravery shattered the second a rock, the size of a fist, landed right next to me. I yelled out in panic and fell into my bike. A few inches to the left, and I would have been done for.
What the hell is wrong with you? Just wait there!
Yet again I was interrupted. but not by yet another rock. This time, I could hear the distant sound of laughter, but something was off about it. On one end, it sounded like a young boy going through puberty. On the other, it had this strange, artificial quality. It might sound comedic, but let me assure you, I was not amused. Whatever the case, I was not about to investigate until I armed myself. After rummaging through the garbage, I found a rusty steel pipe. Then I started sneaking up towards the trees. As soon as I reached the forest edge, I started crouch walking. If I played my cards right, I might get the jump on the person or persons. But no matter how thoroughly I searched, I saw no signs of anyone. I started feeling stupid. Here I was, a grown man armed with a steel pipe, on the lookout for teen delinquents. The grip on my makeshift weapon loosened the more the realization sunk in. I was better than this. I would not resort to violence. Instead, I was just going to take my old route from now on. It was then that I heard a twig snap deeper in the woods. I froze, my grip tightening yet again. Listening closely, I could hear the footsteps of someone moving around further ahead. Whoever it was, they did not want to be seen. I was faced with two options. One, I could pursue them, or two, I could just head straight home and forget all about it. Life would go on, and the last day's events would be chalked up to some kids playing a horrible prank on me. But of course, there was a small lingering voice that told me that they needed to be taught a lesson. They had gone too far. This was no longer a mere joke. So, with that, I resumed my search, carefully looking around, ready for anything, or so I thought. Roughly 10 minutes later, the trees started to thin out to reveal a small clearing. Situated in the center of it was a small, ramshackle shack. On first glance, it didn't look like a place where people had once lived. Rather, it seemed to be some sort of tool shed. The roof had caved in under the weight of a fallen tree that still weighed down the structure. Roof tiles laid scattered and broken in the wild undergrowth. Whatever paint that had once covered the walls had started to peel away, exposing rotting planks beneath. From where I was standing, I couldn't see an entrance, but I could make out two windows. It was too dark to see anything. But the more I looked, the more uneasy I felt. All was quiet. The silence hung like a dark cloud over the small structure, a leftover artifact from a bygone era. Kids or not, I actually felt somewhat scared. I had no idea what I was walking into. You see, young people are just as capable of carrying out acts of violence as adults. I had to brace myself for a minute before I regained my composure. Then it slowly started to dawn on me. Could this be their hideout? Regardless, I had come this far and I couldn't turn back now. However, I decided to not do anything too drastic. Just scare them a little. So, I grabbed a pipe and struck the closest tree while shouting,
I got you now!
There I was, thinking I had them and they would come crawling out of the shed, regretful, ready to apologize. How wrong I was. When I was about to deliver yet another blow, that odd-sounding laughter returned. Only, it was closer this time. Much closer, and far more intense. With that said, I couldn't tell exactly where it was coming from, since that sickening chuckling seemed to be bouncing from tree to tree, consistently assaulting my senses. But if that wasn't horrible enough, that all-too-familiar stench returned. I could feel my lunch working its way up my throat. That smell. My God, how do I even start to explain? Imagine a sickening cocktail of pus-filled wounds, decaying flesh and feces, but even that is an understatement on how awful it truly was. What could have produced such an odor? Stink bombs? Dead animals? My eyes started tearing up. I had to get away, so I ran as fast as I could, away from that horrible reek, away from that haunting laughter. I can't recount how many times I tripped and got up. the countless lashes from branches as they struck my face and hands. At long last, I saw the underpass. Thank God. The bike was still there. I slid down the slope, got up, and then flew up on my seat and started pedaling for my life. The dark forest, a dense blur in my periphery. My eyes remained focused on the path ahead of me. I never looked back, not even once. Back home, I jumped in the shower and spent 30 minutes scrubbing away the disgusting filth that had clung to my skin. As it eventually dissipated, so did the chilling laughter that had plagued me the entire ride home. Exhausted, I collapsed on the couch with a cold beer. It tasted somewhat funky, but I desperately needed it to calm my nerves. My tired eyes looked up at the ceiling. That was it, I thought to myself. Those sick little bastards had won the war. Whoever they were out of their minds. But I accepted defeat. I would never use that detour again. My entire body ached and I eventually passed out. My head was pounding when I woke up to my phone ringing. It was Amir, asking me why the hell I wasn't at work. Of course I had overslept. God damn it! I didn't even bother with breakfast, just slipped in my clothes and rushed to work. Luckily, Amir had talked to our supervisor before I arrived. Not sure what he said, but whatever it was, it worked, as I didn't get fired. For most of the day, I felt like a zombie restocking shelves, processing and packaging orders as well as counting inventory. People could probably tell that something was up, as I kept my distance, even during smoke breaks. On one of those breaks, as I took some deep drags from my cigarette, I could hear someone approaching from behind me. I turned around. It was Amir. He fumbled with his Zippo lighter before he managed to light up. His deep brown eyes bore into my soul as the nicotine-filled smoke escaped his lips before he spoke.
Man, you look rough. What have you been up to?
I rubbed my blurry eyes before replying. It's nothing. Just had trouble falling asleep.
Yeah? And why is that? You up to no good?
Good old Amir. Brazen as usual. Something I've grown to appreciate over the months we've gotten to know each other. I scratched my head, avoiding his penetrating gaze before our eyes met. Should I tell him? I hesitated, but I could tell that Amir wouldn't cut me any slack. So I straight up told him about the notes, the gang of kids, and how they harassed me every day on my way home from work. He grinned and took another drag.
Yeah, that bad, huh? By the way, where'd you say this was?
By the underpass, close to the abandoned industrial park. That one that burnt down all that time ago. In an instant, Amir's smile dropped. His eyes became more intense.
You gotta promise me never to go there again. Ever. You hear me?
I was shocked. Amir had always been a laid-back guy that never got riled up about anything. A smooth talker and a go-getter. The seconds dragged on. No one said anything. Amir's face remained stoic. Eventually I chuckled nervously. Yeah, trust me, I won't. But like I said, it was just a bunch of... Out of nowhere, Amir shot out his arms and grabbed me by the collar. He then drew me closer.
John, I'm not joking, okay?
Amir sounded stern. He then looked over his shoulder as to make sure no one was eavesdropping on our conversation. Once he was assured that we were alone, he let go of me and started telling me things. Strange things about the underpass. Apparently, it was rumored to be haunted. According to his sources, whom he never disclosed, there was something there that had tainted its surroundings. That was the reason why you never saw any animals there or ever heard any birds chirping. Also, whenever people passed through, they would hear weird noises and feel strange, unearthly presences. Some even said that the woods were haunted by those who died in the industrial park fire. I felt a chill running down my neck. Amir continued.
But man, believe me, it gets worse. A couple months before you moved in, something weird happened. There was this kid who went to the same school as my younger brother. One day he didn't show up after school. At first, his parents thought he was just hanging out with some friends and that he would get back to them.
He paused, pulled a deep drag, and glanced over his shoulder again. A small group of co-workers had amassed in the parking lot, outside the warehouse, smoking and talking. I can understand why he was on edge, because if anyone had heard us, they would have thought Amir was crazy.
One day passes. The kid never called or messaged his parents, and he never replied when they tried to get in touch with him. The police, hell, the entire community got involved in looking for him. 3 days later, they find something.
I couldn't help myself but to ask, what did they find?
It was a small sneaker. They found it inside a very small underpass. But no blood, no body. Parents identified it as belonging to their son. But no matter how thoroughly they searched the area, they found nothing. After a couple of weeks, they just accepted that he was gone, almost as if the ground had swallowed him.
First a gang of weird kids, then a haunted underpass, and now a missing kid? I had lived in that town for 4 months, but this was the first time I had heard about it. I looked at Amir, trying to figure out if he was just messing with me. Then I noticed it, how the corner of his mouth was twitching, as if trying to contain himself from laughing. That son of a bitch. I should have known better. What the hell, Amir? I pushed him, with more force than I intended. I half expected Amir to lash out at me, but that didn't happen. Instead, his contagious laugh echoed over the parking lot. Thankfully, no one had seen me acting out. Once he was done laughing, he walked up to me, put his arm over my shoulder. His breath smelled heavily of cigarette smoke. Amir's face cracked into a huge, shit-eating grin.
Come on, John. You don't believe in ghosts, do you?
I tried to play it cool. No, of course not. That's just stupid. A forced smile spread across my face as I untangled myself from his arm. So, everything you said was just bullshit? Amir's face grew a bit colder. He lowered his head, as if he felt ashamed.
Not to think about the kid. Like I said, they never found him.
Yeah, so you told me. But what do you think happened? He struggled and started walking back to the warehouse. I followed suit. On our way back, he said,
No idea. Maybe he ran away. I think that kid had a pretty rough situation at home, you know? I recall my brother telling me that his parents were divorced. Apparently, the dad was a heavy drinker. Not sure about the mother. Regardless, it's all tragic all the same.
I nodded in agreement. As we were about to resume our shift, Amir patted me on the back.
By the way, me, Diego, and Ben are going to hit the bar after work. Care to join? Drinks on me, of course.
I smiled. Wouldn't mind it at all, even if you're a bit of an asshole at times. We ended up going to the usual place. Drank, relaxed, complained about coworkers we couldn't stand, supervisors that we hated, and the same old chagrins. As we had work the next day, we called it quits pretty early and went our separate ways around 11 p.m. Honestly, I was pretty hammered, but I still managed to make my way home without any misadventures. The memories of the underpass and what I had experienced had been pushed down further in the depths of my mind for every beer I had chugged. I was drowsy, but content. The disappearance of the kid, however, was harder to ignore. What a nightmare. All things considered, all the strangeness that had occurred at that underpass, I was still convinced that he had run off, especially if his home situation really was as bad as Amir had stated. Wherever he was, I hoped that he was safe. The moment I got home, I took a quick shower, brushed my teeth, and then passed out on my bed on top of the covers. At around 2 p.m., my bladder started bothering me. I crawled out of bed and made my way to the bathroom just in time. On the way back, I groggily glanced towards the back door leading out my backyard, and at that moment, I froze. I went from half drunk to sober in an instant. There, resting on my plastic outdoor table, amidst the empty beer cans, I saw a small, folded note. As soon as I registered what I was looking at, I bolted towards the door, unlocked it, swung it open, and ran up to the table. The cold night air made my skin prickle, but I didn't even wince, my attention so fully honed in on that small, seemingly insignificant piece of paper. I grabbed it, and without making sure whether or not I was alone, I unfolded it and read. I wasn't sure what I had expected, but what I saw, written in that horrible handwriting, was one simple word. Hi. My heart dropped. How was this even possible? Somehow, those little shits had figured out where I lived. How was that even possible? My hands were shaking as I slowly looked up, ready to face my tormentors. There was no one there, just my unkempt lawn, the asphalted bike lane just beyond the waist-high picket fence, illuminated by the sickly orange glow of a lonely light post. On the opposite side of the lane, I could see 3 small trees and some bushes huddled together, and even further beyond that, rows upon rows of apartments, all identical with their concrete gray hues. The distant glow of light-up apartment windows reminded me of fireflies, and from one of them, I could vaguely make out someone playing music. Nothing out of the ordinary, just another night in my semi-rundown neighborhood, and as soon as that became evident to me, I realized how cold it was outside. I turned around and was about to go inside when the sound of exploding glass shook me to my core. Everything had happened so fast, but despite that, I could still feel how something swept by me with such velocity that I felt a burning sensation on my left cheek. I spun around. In the window closest to the backyard door was a huge gaping hole. Countless shards of broken glass lay scattered over the carpet. That fucking does it. I looked out, but couldn't see whoever had destroyed my property. Thankfully, as I didn't need the attention, the neighbors didn't seem to have reacted. I carefully watched my step as I went to fetch my phone. Once I had it on my person, I dialed 911 while keeping watch from behind the curtains. While waiting for someone to respond, I looked at the disarray within the apartment. I caught a glimpse of something, namely the projectile that had been launched at me. It was not a rock, nor a brick. It was a small sneaker. Amir's words suddenly came back.
No blood, no body.
What the fuck was going on? It was then that a woman responded to my call.
911, what's your emergency?
I couldn't speak. My eyes were fixed on the object before me. In the dim light of the moon that bled into my apartment, I could swear that I saw dark stains along the collar lining. Could it be blood? The dispatcher's voice sounded again.
Hello? Anyone there? Please respond.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't make it further than that. For in the night air I heard it, the eerie clucking laughter. The woman's voice sounded as if it was a million miles away. It didn't take long for the repugnant stench to make itself known. It coated my tongue like a disgusting film, made me violently cough and retch. But in despite of all the horrifying impressions that my senses could detect, I did not flee. You see, I couldn't. I had to, needed to identify my tormentors. I convinced myself that only then could I feel released. So, I slowly turned around, expecting to see the cruel, demented smiles of my teenage harassers. But what I saw will forever infest my thoughts until the day I die. From the bushes, across the bike lane, a figure crawled out on its belly. It was naked. Its torso, arms, and legs were covered in third-degree burns, red blistered patches of swollen skin, boils ready to burst. Even through his appearance, I could tell it was a man, or at least a shell of one. What shocked me the most was how crooked he was. The upper body somehow appeared to be hanging limply as it gradually began to rise, as if it had been bent over backwards. It is impossible to fully describe all of the disfigured man's features, this grim parody of human anatomy. But there is one small detail that I shall never forget. As his pale, withered tongue oscillated along his decaying teeth, he raised a hand. The two still intact fingers pointed at me, then back at him, and as he did so, I could see him mouthing something. Although charred and deformed, I could still make out what those lips said. I see you.